My family left me in a homeless shelter 400 miles away and laughed, "Let's see how she survives." The family road trip had been Mom's brilliant idea. One last adventure before I got swallowed up by the real world, she told everyone at Sunday dinner. That's what she announced to the neighbors too. I had just graduated from Riverside Community College with a 3.8 GPA. My resumes were circulating to non-profits across 3 states, and I was helping with household expenses while I waited for responses. But to my parents, that somehow translated to being a freeloader. We rented a silver Honda Pilot for the journey, a scenic loop through Tennessee's backwoods, hitting small mountain towns and national forests. Mom packed trail mix, sandwiches, and juice boxes for everyone except me. "You'll manage just fine," she said, not looking up from her packing list. "It's not like you're wasting away." Dad chuckled from his recliner, and my younger brother Tyler, always ready with a cruel joke, added, "She survives on coffee and determination anyway. Probably photosynthesis too." I claimed the window seat behind the driver, earbuds in, staring at the passing landscape. My Spotify playlist wasn't even playing. I just needed them to think I couldn't hear their whispered conversations about how I was still living like a teenager and needed to learn independence the hard way. My father's voice cut through the engine noise like broken glass. "She better not drag down this whole trip with her attitude. I've invested enough in her dead-end dreams." I was 23, working weekends at a local bookstore, and still contributing $400 monthly for my childhood bedroom. But in their version of reality, I was some kind of parasite. They reminded me daily. 4 days into our Tennessee adventure, we pulled into a town that felt like it existed outside of time itself. Millfield Hollow, the kind of place you only discover when your GPS stops working or you're running from something. One Chevron station, a pair of diners with hand-painted signs, and cell towers that apparently gave up trying to reach this far into the mountains. We needed rest, so we stopped at the Pine View Motor Lodge. "I'll go check on room availability," I volunteered, hoping to escape the car's suffocating tension for a few minutes. Dad pulled out a wrinkled $10 bill and tossed it at me. "Here," he said with that familiar smirk. "Buy yourself some self-respect while you're in there." I walked into the lobby with my cheeks burning and my throat tight. The elderly clerk was kind, showing me a rate card and asking about our length of stay. When I stepped back outside 5 minutes later, the parking space was empty. The silver Honda Pilot had vanished. At first, I convinced myself they were playing some twisted joke. Maybe they'd driven to the diner next door to grab coffee. Maybe Tyler had convinced them to scare me as payback for some imagined slight. I waited 15 minutes, then 30, then a full hour. Finally, my hands shaking, I approached the front desk again. "Excuse me," I whispered to the clerk. "Did anyone leave a message for Emma?" She looked uncomfortable, reaching under the counter to retrieve a torn piece of notebook paper. In Mom's careful handwriting, it read, "Let's see how she survives without us holding her hand. Walk home if you want to catch up. Might do you some good." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked outside and sat down on the concrete curb, staring at the cracked asphalt like it might reveal some hidden explanation for what I'd done to deserve this. By sunset, I still hadn't moved from that curb. My phone showed no signal. My wallet contained $12 and a debit card linked to an account with maybe $60. And my family was somewhere on Highway 40, probably celebrating their newfound freedom from their burden. A man eventually approached me, thin, probably in his 50s, wearing maintenance coveralls with Danny embroidered on the pocket. He worked at the Valley Hope shelter 2 blocks away and had noticed me sitting alone as his shift ended. "You doing okay out here?" he asked. His voice reminded me of warm honey, patient and careful. I couldn't speak at first. When I finally managed to explain what happened, his expression hardened. "Nobody deserves that," he said quietly. "Come on. Let's get you somewhere safe, and we'll figure out next steps." The Valley Hope shelter wasn't what I'd imagined from movies or news reports. No chaos, no shouting, just exhausted people trying to rebuild their lives with dignity. Danny introduced me to the night supervisor, gave me a cot in the women's section, and brought me a bowl of chicken noodle soup with crackers. He sat with me while I ate, not asking questions, not offering empty platitudes. Just present. For the first time in years, someone was simply kind to me without expecting anything in return. That night, I cried myself to sleep on a narrow mattress with springs that creaked every time I moved. But my tears were silent. I'd learned long ago to keep my pain quiet. The next morning, I asked Danny if I could help around the shelter. I cleaned bathrooms, served breakfast, organized donated clothing. He didn't try to stop me. Every time I attempted to thank him, he'd wave me off. "You're helping yourself," he'd say. "That's what matters." A week passed. No missing person reports, no frantic phone calls, not even a text message asking if I was alive. They had completely erased me from their lives. One afternoon, a young mother arrived at the shelter with twin toddlers and a black eye. She spoke limited English, but when she saw me at the intake desk, she grabbed my hand and whispered, "Safe here." I found myself standing taller, looking her directly in the eyes. "Yes," I said firmly. "You're safe here." And in that moment, I realized something crucial. I wasn't useless. I had value beyond what my family had convinced me to believe. Over the following month, Danny taught me how the shelter operated, where food donations came from, how to manage the volunteer schedule, how to connect residents with job training programs. He started trusting me with real responsibilities, letting me conduct intake interviews and coordinate with social workers. One evening, as we shared terrible coffee on the shelter's back porch, he said something that changed my perspective forever. "You were never the problem, Emma. You were just trapped in the wrong environment." 2 months passed, then 3. I never heard from my parents again. But I stopped waiting for their call. Instead, I enrolled in a social work certificate program at East Tennessee State University's satellite campus. Danny's idea. I got accepted with partial scholarship funding. I saved every stipend dollar, took a night shift cleaning office buildings, and never stopped helping others find their footing. But the part of me that had been abandoned on that motel curb still ached with unfinished business. That ache turned into fuel. While my family continued their lives pretending I'd never existed, I was building something they couldn't have imagined. After completing my certificate, I secured a full-time position as Valley Hope's program coordinator. I restructured our volunteer system, secured 3 major grants, and helped expand our capacity from 30 beds to 60. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The families we helped started requesting me specifically. The kids remembered my name. And thanks to a volunteer accountant named Greg Hamilton, who noticed how I managed our budget spreadsheets, I was now taking business management courses online, fully funded by the Appalachian Community Foundation. Turns out I was good at more than just enduring cruelty. But that abandoned girl on the motel curb wasn't satisfied with simply moving forward. She wanted justice. She wanted them to understand exactly what they'd thrown away. Then fate handed me the perfect opportunity. The Tennessee Association of Nonprofit Organizations selected Valley Hope for their annual Excellence in Community Impact Award. They wanted me to accept it publicly at their gala in Nashville. My name would be on the program, in the media, everywhere. That's when the story went viral. Abandoned by family, young woman transforms homeless shelter that saved her. The headlines were everywhere: CNN, Good Morning America, People magazine. Suddenly, I wasn't just Emma from the shelter. I was a symbol of resilience. And that's when my family saw me again. Not in person, but on their television screen during the evening news. There I was, standing at a podium in a navy blue dress I'd bought with my own money, thanking Danny, the staff, the volunteers. Then, with every camera focused on my face, I said something that made the entire room go silent. I used to believe I was worthless. My own family made sure I believed that. They abandoned me 400 miles from home and left a note saying, "Let's see how she survives." Well, this is how I survived. The applause was thunderous. The clip went viral within hours. 2 weeks later, I received a letter forwarded from the shelter. Mom's handwriting on the envelope, my childhood address in the return corner. Inside, no apology, no explanation for 3 years of silence. Just, "Tyler is having trouble finding work. Your father needs knee surgery. We could really use your help right now. No, we're sorry. No, we miss you." Just a transparent attempt to cash in on my success. I smiled as I folded the letter and filed it in a manila folder labeled evidence. Because I wasn't done. Not even close. I reached out to the journalist who'd written the most comprehensive piece about my story, Helena Rodriguez from the Nashville scene. I told her I was ready to share more details, the years of emotional abuse, the constant reminders that I was a burden, the cruel jokes at family dinners. "Do you want to remain anonymous for this follow-up piece?" she asked during our phone interview. "No," I said without hesitation. "I want my name on every word." The article published on a Thursday morning. By Friday, it was trending on social media. Family's cruel abandonment of daughter sparks national conversation about emotional abuse. The subheading read, "They said let's see how she survives." She did more than survive, she became a hero. Suddenly, everyone had opinions. Talk show hosts, child psychologists, even politicians started referencing my story in speeches about family support systems. The backlash against my parents was swift and merciless. I knew this because Tyler finally broke his 3-year silence. A text message at 11:47 p.m. "What the hell did you do? Mom can't leave the house without neighbors staring. Dad's co-workers are giving him the cold shoulder. Please make this stop. You've proven your point." But I hadn't. "Not yet," I replied, "I'm just getting started." Because my final move was still coming. And it was going to be perfect. The timing couldn't have been better. Millbrook Heights, my old neighborhood, was celebrating its 25th anniversary with a community festival. A weekend-long celebration complete with food trucks, live music, and speeches from longtime residents who'd helped shape the community. And guess who had quietly become a major donor to the Millbrook Heights Community Development Fund? That's right, me. Through a limited liability company I'd established called Second Chances Ventures, I'd contributed enough money to have input on the event planning, including the guest list and speaking schedule. I made sure my parents received personal invitations. Handwritten notes on expensive cardstock, mentioning how the committee would be honored by their presence and wanted to celebrate families who'd been part of Millbrook Heights since the beginning. They had no idea I was involved. They thought it was just a neighborhood party. I spent weeks preparing. Not just the logistics, but emotionally steeling myself for what I was about to do. Danny noticed my mood shifting as the date approached. "You sure about this?" he asked one evening as we locked up the shelter together. "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Just remember, revenge is a meal best served with purpose. Make sure you're doing this for the right reasons." I was. This wasn't just about hurting them. It was about making sure they could never hurt anyone else the way they'd hurt me. The festival was everything I'd hoped for. Perfect October weather, families everywhere, local news cameras capturing the celebration. I arrived early, dressed in a tailored burgundy blazer and black slacks, the kind of outfit that commands respect. I looked like success, and I felt it too. When my parents walked through the community center doors, I was already at the podium, microphone in hand, delivering my opening remarks as the festival's keynote speaker. The irony was delicious. They stopped dead in their tracks. Mom was wearing her favorite cream-colored cardigan and the pearl necklace she saved for special occasions. Dad had on his blue button-down shirt and the same smug expression he'd worn when he handed me that $10 bill 3 years ago. But I watched that smugness evaporate in real time. His shoulders tensed. Mom clutched her purse like a life preserver. Tyler, standing behind them, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I welcomed the crowd warmly, told them how meaningful this neighborhood had been to me growing up, even as someone who'd been discarded from it. I thanked the organizers, praised the community spirit, mentioned how the shelter had taught me the true meaning of family. Then I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone lean in. "There's one more thing I want to share with you tonight," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You may have heard my story in the news, but I'm not here to speak as a victim. I'm here to offer something I never received, a chance at redemption." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The large screen behind me flickered to life, displaying a photo I'd kept for 3 years. The Pineview Motor Lodge parking lot, my small suitcase visible in the frame, and a crumpled piece of notebook paper on the ground beside it. "This was the note my family left me with," I continued, my voice never wavering. 400 miles from home. No phone, no money, no explanation. Just instructions to figure it out and walk home if I wanted to catch up. Well, I figured it out, all right. The screen changed to show a professional headshot of me accepting the Tennessee Nonprofit Award, then images of the expanded Valley Hope Shelter, smiling families I'd helped, children I'd saved from situations like my own. "And now I'd like to return the favor," I said. From backstage, 2 volunteers wheeled out a giant cardboard check made out to the Millbrook Heights Beautiful Family Award. The amount line read, $0, revoked due to moral bankruptcy. But I wasn't finished. The slideshow began, screenshots of social media posts where they'd celebrated my disappearance, old family photos where I'd been deliberately excluded, voice messages I'd saved where they joked about their newfound freedom. They laughed when they abandoned me, I told the hushed crowd. So I built something they could never be part of. And now they can't even get through the door. That was literally true. Through my non-profit connections, I'd arranged for Valley Hope to add their names to a database of individuals prohibited from volunteering at or accessing services from partnered organizations across 3 states. Not out of spite, out of safety for vulnerable people. My parents stood frozen, faces pale, completely exposed. When the presentation ended and people began approaching me with congratulations, Dad tried to push through the crowd. "Emma, listen, we need to talk." I held up my hand. "If you speak to me, I will make sure this entire community knows everything. Every cruel comment, every deliberate humiliation, every time you made me feel worthless. I have documentation, witnesses, and a platform. This is your chance to walk away with whatever dignity you have left." Mom's bottom lip trembled. Dad looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, as if the weight of public judgment had physically diminished him. Then came my final gift. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope with their names written in my careful handwriting. Inside was a cashier's check for exactly $1, with payment for services rendered written in the memo line. Below that, in smaller print, "Thank you for teaching me exactly what kind of person I never want to become." Dad stared at the check like it might burst into flames. Mom's hands were shaking as she held the envelope. "This is what you're worth to me now," I said quietly, just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. $1. The same amount of respect you showed me when you drove away from that motel. Tyler stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "Emma, this is insane. We're family." "No," I interrupted. "Family doesn't abandon each other 400 miles from home. Family doesn't leave cruel notes and drive away laughing. You stopped being my family the moment you decided I was disposable." The crowd around us had grown silent, everyone straining to hear this confrontation years in the making. Local news cameras were rolling, capturing every moment. "You want to know the difference between us?" I continued, my voice growing stronger. "When I was abandoned and had nothing, I used it to build something beautiful. When you had everything, a home, a family, each other, you used it to destroy someone you were supposed to love." I looked directly at each of them, memorizing their faces. "I forgave you a long time ago, not because you deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen. And it sure as hell doesn't mean letting you back into my life." The crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a sustained ovation. Someone shouted, "You tell them, Emma." Others joined in with encouragement. My parents didn't try to argue. They didn't attempt to defend themselves or offer explanations. They just turned and walked. Toward the exit, shoulders hunched, moving like people who'd finally understood the weight of their own actions. Tyler lingered for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something. But what was there to say? He'd been part of it. He'd laughed along with the jokes, contributed to the cruelty, celebrated when I disappeared from their lives. "Goodbye, Tyler," I said simply. He nodded once and followed our parents out the door. I watched them leave, 3 people who'd once had the power to make me feel worthless, now walking away in shame while a room full of strangers celebrated my strength. The little girl who'd been abandoned on that motel curb was finally, truly free. But the story wasn't over yet. Because as they disappeared into the parking lot, I realized something profound. I hadn't just survived what they did to me. I'd become the reason it would never happen to anyone else. As the festival continued around me, I stepped outside for some air. The October evening was crisp and clear, stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Danny appeared beside me, having driven up from the shelter to watch my moment of truth. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," I said, and meant it. For the first time in my life, completely free. We stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching families pack up their picnic blankets and load sleepy children into cars. Normal families. Loving families. The kind I'd thought existed only in movies when I was growing up. "What's next?" Danny asked. I smiled, pulling out my phone to show him an email I'd received that morning. The Department of Children and Family Services wants me to design a statewide program for family reunification services. They're offering me a position as regional director. His eyebrows shot up. "Emma, that's incredible. You'd be helping thousands of families. Helping them stay together," I said. Making sure kids don't end up abandoned like I was. Making sure parents get the support they need before they do something unforgivable. A group of children ran past us, laughing and chasing fireflies. One of them, a little girl maybe 7 years old, stopped and looked up at me with curious eyes. "Are you the lady from the stage?" she asked. "The one who helps people?" I knelt down to her level. "I try to help when I can. What's your name?" "Isabella," she said shyly. "My mom says you're really brave." "Your mom sounds very smart," I replied. "Do you know what I think makes someone really brave?" She shook her head. "Choosing to be kind even when other people haven't been kind to you. Helping others even when you're still healing yourself. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." Isabella smiled and ran back to her family, where a woman I assumed was her mother waved gratefully in my direction. As I watched them walk away together, a real family, holding hands and laughing, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just peace, but genuine happiness. The kind that comes from knowing your pain had purpose, that your struggle had created something beautiful. Danny put his hand on my shoulder. "You know what I'm proudest of," he said. "What's that?" "You didn't let them make you cruel. You could have become just like them, bitter, vengeful, small. Instead, you became everything they weren't. That's not just survival, Emma. That's transformation." He was right. I thought about the woman with the black eye who'd asked if she was safe. The teenagers I'd helped enroll in GED programs. The families I'd kept together through crisis intervention. The policy changes I'd advocated for at the state level. My parents had abandoned me because they saw me as worthless. But that abandonment had led me to discover my actual worth, not as their daughter, but as someone who could prevent other families from shattering the way mine had. 6 months later, I was settling into my new office in Nashville when my assistant buzzed me. "Emma, there's a young woman here who says she doesn't have an appointment, but she really needs to speak with someone about her situation." "Send her in," I said. The girl who walked through my door couldn't have been older than 19. She had the same hollow look in her eyes that I remembered from my own reflection 3 years ago. The same defensive posture, the same careful way of moving through the world. "I saw your story on the news," she said quietly, settling into the chair across from my desk. "About how your family left you. I'm in a similar situation." I leaned forward, giving her my full attention. "Tell me what's happening." As she spoke, about parents who called her a burden, siblings who excluded her, a family vacation she wasn't invited on, I saw myself. But I also saw possibility. Because unlike me 3 years ago, she wasn't alone. She had resources, people who understood, a system designed to catch her before she fell. "What's your name?" I asked when she finished. "Sophia," she whispered. "Well, Sophia," I said, pulling out a fresh legal pad and uncapping my pen, "let's figure out how to keep your family together. And if we can't do that, let's make sure you have everything you need to build a better life than they could have given you anyway." She looked up at me with hope in her eyes, the same hope Danny had given me in that shelter parking lot 3 years ago. And I realized this was why everything had happened the way it did. Not so I could get revenge on the people who hurt me, but so I could prevent other people from experiencing that same pain. My family had tried to destroy me by leaving me behind. Instead, they'd freed me to become exactly who I was meant to be, someone who makes sure no one gets left behind ever again. The girl who'd been abandoned on that motel curb was gone. In her place sat a woman who'd learned that sometimes the most beautiful thing you can build from the wreckage of your life is a bridge that helps others avoid the same destruction. And that, I thought as I began taking notes on Sophia's situation, was the best revenge of all.